Hi, welcome. Today we're going to paint a sunflower and we're going to do some chatting. I have caked on pounds and pounds of makeup for you and stumbled on putting on lashes, even a dress. Ooh. So let's relax, just chat. I'm going to stumble through painting this sunflower and we're going to talk about some things. And I would love if you enjoy the content, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and also comment. Alrighty, let's get into it. Hey y'all. So today we're gonna paint this sunflower, and I just wanted to chat. Let's see, I'm going to try and load this with water. I used watercolor pencils to do pretty much like the drawing and just decided to go from there. So I actually wanted to chat about my experience as a woman in corporate America, a black woman in corporate America, if that's not super obvious. Sometimes I do get asked, what are you mixed with? I'm black. Just a bit on the lighter hue, but yeah. And I had some hesitations initially about creating this video because I still work in corporate America technically, and these issues, they're not really talked about, of course, because it's not seen as appropriate. You can really risk a lot with your career, and it's expected, kind of, you just put up with it. That's just the cost of working at corporate America, especially as a black person, especially as a black woman. And not to say that all of my experiences in corporate America has been like simply abysmal, but I've definitely have experienced a lot of insensitivity, and I've definitely experienced racism, unfortunately, just because most of corporate America is white male. And unfortunately, even, the type of environment doesn't really facilitate people who even would be your allies. It doesn't empower them to say like, hey, this behavior is not okay, and I'm calling it out. It's kind of like, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. And I feel like, you could technically go to HR, but they're not really there to make, they're not really there to fight racial inequality. They're there to, for the company not to like get lawsuits. So, just understanding that it's kind of one of those things where, the pay is very nice, and you know that it can be nice. What your next check is coming from, And honestly, you know, working in corporate America is stressful. It's stressful no matter who you are, but I feel if you are, I hate using this word, but I mean, you know, it is what it is. If you're a minority, because most of corporate America is white, especially white male, depending on what industry you work on in. But you know, even as a woman, you would think that you would have other allies in other women despite color differences, but we still have the racial hierarchy playing out. So not really. And a lot of times I've experienced quite a bit of hostility from women, because not only do you have, unfortunately, you know, women being catty, but also, you know, a lot of times, depending on the woman, there can definitely be a racial component played out, and not necessarily that woman be not necessarily just an out racist, but definitely using the racial component to their benefit to paint, you know, the black woman as, oh, you know, she's so mean and, you know, aggressive and blah blah blah. So I want to get into some things that have been said to me on the job, and some of these are like kind of like, you know, what you typically hear. Like, I live in a city, so if you hear city noises, just bear with it. Like, you know, I don't have like a professional setup. This is just me in my kitchen with my window open because I don't have the air conditioner on, just painting and talking with you guys. But basically, like, I've heard things about, you know, as far as like the whole hair thing. So, you know, I have like a straight wig on now. I don't, you know, I love wigs of all colors. I debated about wearing a pink wig on here, on this video, maybe in a later video, but I decided to wear a natural wigs. I think they're fabulous. I think they're an easy way to really change, even elevate a look. So I love wigs. But I have worn my hair like, excuse me, naturally curly, and I've had questions about, you know, not necessarily racially insensitive, but just really kind of out of, and when I say this, I mean it in like the pure definition, just ignorance, like people not knowing, like, oh, do you have to curl your hair that type of, you know, to be that curly? No, girl, my hair is naturally curly. But I have had like co-workers try to touch my hair, and you know, it's weird because it's kind of like, you should know, like, that's not okay. Why would you think I would be okay with that? Like, it, like, is it, do you touch other white people's hair when it's different? Or like, period, like, do you have like other people like touching your hair like, oh wow, it's so like straight, like, you know, so why would you think it's okay to touch my hair because it's curly? It's not okay to touch people, period, but it definitely don't touch my hair. Especially, I don't know where your hands have been. I remember I told one girl, I was like, don't, she tried to like, I actually had my hair straightened, and at the time my natural hair straightened was very long, like almost to my waist. And she was like, oh wow, is that your real hair? Which is like, yeah girl, it is my real hair. Like, you know, it's like, well, I could give her the benefit of the doubt and say it was because like it was, you know, normally when it's curly hair is going to appear shorter, but straightened is going to appear longer. But it's like, this is still not your territory to inquire about my hair at work and to be so inappropriate about it. I got kind of snappy with her because like I felt like all in my right that I should. This is not okay. You know, we are not like BFFs. And even if we were, it's not appropriate to do that at work. Especially, you know, we were in front of like other people. And it's just like, you are very ignorant. So that was one thing. Another thing I've noticed, I've had plenty of people ask me, did you graduate from college? And I had a friend, you know, my friend is white. She told me like, you know, that's like a racist question. And I always thought that, you know, it had some racial connotations because it's kind of like, girl, first of all, why do you care if I graduated from college? Like, yeah, I did. I have the student loan debt to like prove it. And then second of all, like, it really isn't appropriate to ask somebody that. What business is it of yours? And it comes with this whole like attitude of like, you know, are you qualified to work this position? You know, are you more qualified than me? And it's like, well, I'm probably, because the industry I work in, like when I started off in the industry, I actually didn't have my 4-year degree. I went to college right after high school, as most millennials have like done. But this was the thing. This was around the time I was a graphic design major. This was around the time where Photoshop was really gaining a ton of market space in the industry. And I went to a 4-year like state school, like local state school, and we were like just learning like old school, like, you know, T-square graph paper techniques to graphic design, like, you know, what was, you know, kind of in vogue in the 60s. Because most of our professors, they worked in the industry, but they were retired and they taught. So, and we got basically 1 semester of Photoshop, and you had people, especially people in other countries, like in different parts of Asia, where it's cheaper to hire like designers who basically have used Photoshop, Illustrator at the time. InDesign, that was like a big program. They, you know, had probably 1,000 hours under their belt of using these programs, whereas like our portfolios consisted of like, you know, graph like 3-dimensional figures and just like really antiquated like techniques that were not used in the industry. So I felt at the time, okay, I'm going to drop out and I'm going to figure out, like, I'm going to take, I guess, like what's called like a gap year. And I did a technology internship that was very intense. And I ended up actually getting into marketing and development for marketing for big corporations, just based on me putting in the work outside of school. So later on, I decided to get my degree because a lot of these companies were using me not having a degree, but you know, I had great experience. Like I had experience pitching businesses. I had experience developing an email, basically an email program, and other like just high level experience with the internship. But because I didn't have the 4-year degree, they could use the excuse to underpay me. So I got my degree, and by this time, you know, I had been in the industry, in my particular industry, for maybe about a few years. Like I started in my early 20s, and it's been over 10 years now. So I have, you know, a good amount of experience. Like, am I the best developer? No, I'm not gonna say that, but I'm pretty competent at what I do. And so hearing this from other colleagues, and a lot of times they would be older colleagues, and I don't know if there was a factor of intimidation because, you know, I look very young for my age, and then, you know, I kind of have like a young at heart type of spirit. I just do. In a lot of ways, people have called me kind of an old soul. And I'm gonna switch brushes. Just load this up. And so I think there might be some level of confusion there, but I don't think asking like a person, especially like a black person at your job, like, do you have like your degree? I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's appropriate to ask anybody, first of all, because it's like, it's not really your business. Why are you asking me that question? And I even asked my friend, like, have you ever been asked that? She's like, no. She was like, when people, like, basically she was like, when white people ask you that, it has a racist connotation. So don't do that. Also, asking about, like, I've gotten this from like different colleagues or whatever, which this question is really weird. I mean, it always made me feel weird, but it wasn't until like I realized, like, oh, this has like a racial component to it. Like, I'm in Chicago, and born and raised in the city, just what it is. And I've had people ask me, oh, you know, where do you live? And I'm like, oh yeah, in the city. For the longest, actually, I lived in the burbs, but like right now I'm in the city. And they're like, oh, in the city. And you would think like, oh, okay, it's gonna end with that. And then it's like, oh, what part of the city? It's kind of like, oh, do you live in the ghetto? You know, it's kind of like, well, even if I do, why does that matter to you? It's kind of like, oh, I know, like, you know, she probably like ghetto. She's like probably just one of those ghetto girls. It's not cool, you know, unless like, you know, you're coming over. It's none of your business of like where I live. And if I say Chicago, like, why are you pressing on? I don't like that. it's like it has like this racist, classist like connotation that like I really like. It really like, it's not cool, you know, because it's like, okay, what are you getting out of this, you know? Yeah, you might live in like, you know, one of the richer areas, but you also might have like 50 million roommates because your rent is like, you know, $5,000 a month. Or you might be just like, you know, kind of house poor. Well, like, what are you getting out of asking me about like my current residency? Like, you're not coming over. We're not like going to go to the farmer's market on the weekend and like hang out, you know? It's just like another way to cause division, and I don't like it. It's kind of like, I don't like that you are working here, so I'm going to ask you like really insensitive questions to make you feel like a pariah like at work. And it's kind of like, what do you get out of this? You're not the CEO. You can get laid off too. And I think a lot of people are finding out that, you know, this whole like, you know, just working at corporate, you know, there's no security there. Having your identity attached to like your corporate job, that probably is something of the past now, because these companies see me as numbers. So why are you causing more division at work? You know, like, no. I'm really trying to like make the negative space in this sunflower, so bear with me, y'all. Let's see. And another thing I've experienced working corporate, just like the relational aggression as far as like the women are concerned, like leaving me out of meetings, over talking me, not really, or like, you know, oh, this is another thing, the name. Okay, so my real name, I actually have a very 80s name. It's not, you know, it always comes up as like, the connotation is like, oh, you have like such a freaking ethnic name, you know, and it's like, well, even if I do, so what? You know, there's different types of people in this world, in this country, and sometimes people have names that are not, you know, conventional, and that's okay. But it's like seen as like, you know, kind of like, oh, you know, why don't you change your name, like shorten it to something that sounds like more conventional? And I don't, because it's like, why do I need to do that? Like, my real name is like 2 syllables, and it's actually really easy to pronounce. And I remember back in my 20s, my early like 20s, I was working for this one guy. He was a piece of work at a door supply company, but he suggested that like I shorten my name, you know, and I wasn't going to do that. I've never done that. Like, I almost got into it with one lady at my current job, about that. You know, it was like, it was almost to like, you know, the needle is gonna like stop or whatever, like on the record. But it wasn't until like I mentioned that I worked with this other lady, that she was like, oh, you know, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, you know, she was like more understanding, but it was really, really weird. You know, like also too, it doesn't help that especially now as I've gotten older, I've tried to get more in touch with my femininity. So, you know, wearing makeup to work, like I don't wear like as much makeup as I have on camera. Like I want it to show up. So girl, you got to cake it on, you know, at least like for me. If you're hearing all the wind, like there's actually a storm going on, so that's kind of cool. But like so, you know, I try to be more feminine just because like I've always kind of had like this kind of kid sister tomboyish type of like style about me, I want to say. And you know, sometimes, you know, you just kind of want to change. So I started, you know, kind of wearing more like conventionally like feminine like makeup, and you know, just I guess dressing and looking more like conventionally attractive. And that has been met with hostility, not only just, you know, just women in general, but like the tension is kind of like, and maybe, you know, it's kind of like it's not expected as a black woman for you to like look conventionally attractive, because in the media normally you don't really see too much of that. So that's kind of met with hostility. And from like some of the male co-workers, that's been met with basically harassment. You know, I've been catcalled on like meeting like calls or whatever. I've just experienced like kind of like harassment from my male counterparts. This made me uncomfortable, honestly. And it's kind of like I don't really have like female allies, because it's seen as like, oh, you know, you want this type of attention. It's like, man, if this attention was like from a single guy at work who wasn't catcalling me after, or like, you know, during a meeting, you know, who like after work or whatever was, you know, and like we were on a date or something like that, that would be one story, versus like we're in a meeting and, you know, I'm hearing like, oh wow, and like, oh yeah, you look great. It's just, it's weird. It's weird and it's uncomfortable, but it's like one of those things where it's like, well, I've you know, talked to somebody, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, a stranger who basically was like, well, why don't you like dress more frumpy? And it's like, well, I shouldn't have to change my appearance to like get respect at work, you know? So I was kind of hesitant about making this video, but I feel like it needs to be done. And I'm gonna pause right now. I need to get some napkins. Be right. Hey, I try to wipe up some of the mistakes, but I can't avoid them. I and I'm making this video just to get this off of my chest. It's not like I've had like bad interactions with like all of my like coworkers who are like non-black. Not at all. Actually, I've had some really great like, you know, acquaintanceships, associateships, friendships with people at work. It's just that like some of the bad actors, it really kind of leads like really, it can be really alienating, and I find that unfortunate, especially at work, because I feel like, you know, work is work already. Why do we have to make it so hard on us? And honestly, also too, like, this is not to say that I haven't gotten grief from other black people at these companies, because I definitely have. And maybe that will be like an entirely different video, because personally, I think that just corporate environment, it really breeds this like environment of like hostility, competition. You know, it doesn't really breed an environment of trust, of camaraderie. You know, it's kind of like, you know, very, you have to be very Machiavellian, you know, very just out for you. And unfortunately, you know, high school politics usually apply. But I am going to sign off. So I hope that you enjoyed this content. As these videos progress, I'm hoping to progress better with my watercolor. I'm just like jumping into watercolor. I find it relaxing, and it's a great format to just sit down and talk with y'all. Alrighty. Hope you have a great day. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share. And thank you for joining me. I hope to bring you more enjoyable content. Hopefully the watercolor skills will get better. One of the ladies, she was so sweet in one of the groups that I'm in. She gave me some tips, or she didn't give me tips. She gave me like a link to a guy that has phenomenal watercolor skills. So that it, like, this group is like on Facebook. So yeah, and stay safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.